In the heart of the galaxy, whispers echoed through the crowded corridors and dimly lit halls of the galactic fighting pits. Built into the ancient stone of a long-forgotten moon, the pits were a spectacle unlike any other, a place where the best warriors across countless species battled to claim glory. Alien spectators filled the stands, buzzing with excitement, and the air was thick with the anticipation of the day's matches. It was a gathering point for beings from the furthest reaches of the galaxy, all unified by one thing, a thirst for combat. Here, strength, strategy, and resilience were worshipped, and every new battle added to the legacy of these revered pits. But there was a particular topic that had captured the interest of everyone around: humans. The rare tales of human fighters who had once stepped foot into the fighting pits had taken on an almost mythical quality. And yet, despite the intrigue, there was one absolute rule: the prohibition against humans competing. To most aliens in the crowd, the very idea was baffling. What could be so dangerous about them? One young alien asked, curious eyes scanning the faces of older, more seasoned fighters who seemed to grow tense at the mention of humans. An elder alien, his scales dull and scarred, leaned in close, his voice barely a whisper. Because they're different. They're not just strong or fast. There's something else, something that even the Council fears. He paused, eyes narrowing as if replaying memories he'd rather forget. I was there, young one, the last time they allowed a human in the pits. Those nearby leaned in, caught in the elder's tale, as he recounted the legend of the human fighter, Reed. It had been decades, yet those who had witnessed it firsthand spoke as if it were yesterday. When Reed had first entered the arena, the crowd had laughed, dismissing him as an easy target. Compared to the other fighters, he appeared almost fragile, slender, unimposing, not even covered in armor. It was only when the fighting began that they understood how wrong they'd been. Reed's first match was against a brutal alien warrior from the Zathic species, a towering opponent known for its impenetrable exoskeleton and brute strength. The creature charged at him with the confidence of one who knew he could end the match in seconds. But Reed didn't flinch. In the pits, alien warriors were accustomed to straightforward battles, pitting strength against strength, claw against claw, force against force. Reed, however, moved with precision and an intensity that the crowd had never seen before. As the Zathic warrior lunged, Reed sidestepped with impossible agility, ducking under the alien's swing and landing a quick blow to its exposed flank. It wasn't a powerful strike by any means, but it was exactly what was needed. The Zathic stumbled, confused, and Reed stayed on the attack, darting in and out of his opponent's range with almost surgical precision. He was reading his opponent, exploiting every weakness. The Zathic swung harder, angrier, but Reed anticipated each move, adapting in real time. In the stands, whispers of disbelief started to spread. No one had seen fighting like this before. The aliens in the crowd were accustomed to warriors who relied on raw power or innate defenses. But Reed's approach was different. It was as if he wasn't just fighting physically, he was unraveling his opponent mentally. His strikes were targeted, efficient, aimed not to overpower, but to destabilize, to disorient. The battle was over faster than anyone could have anticipated. When Reed delivered the final blow, it wasn't with brute force. It was with precision, a calculated strike to the Zathic's vulnerable spot. The crowd was left stunned, unable to process what they had witnessed. Reed hadn't fought like a typical warrior, he had fought like a strategist, a predator analyzing and dismantling his prey piece by piece. But what left an even deeper impression was his endurance. During his second match, Reed faced an opponent that inflicted injuries meant to incapacitate. Blood spilled onto the arena floor, his face bruised and battered. Yet he never stopped. Wounded, exhausted, Reed kept pushing forward, his face set with a determination that bordered on madness. Other fighters would have retreated, accepted defeat. But humans, it seemed, were driven by something beyond pain or logic. They didn't know when to quit. The elder's voice grew quieter, his gaze distant as if lost in the memory of that brutal day. He just kept going, he said, shaking his head. We thought he'd fall any second, but he didn't. Even his opponent, twice his size, started to back away, confused, maybe even afraid. It was as if Reed's resolve alone was enough to break something inside him. The crowd around the elder listened, captivated. To them, the story was both inspiring and terrifying. They'd heard of species with unmatched strength, speed, or durability. But what Reed had displayed was different. It wasn't rooted in physicality. It was a combination of unrelenting will and an intellect that adapted to each new threat. He didn't just win, he dismantled his opponents in ways that seemed impossible to counter. The legend of that final match spread quickly, and soon every corner of the galaxy was talking about it. The council took notice, realizing that humans brought something to the pits that disrupted the balance they'd so carefully maintained. They weren't like the other warriors, whose strengths and weaknesses were predictable. Humans were unpredictable, with an emotional drive that pushed them past limits other species couldn't fathom. In the days that followed Reed's victory, the council convened to discuss what they had witnessed. There was no official report released, only the quiet, irrevocable decision to ban humans from the pits. The council labeled them as incompatible, though everyone knew the truth. Humans were incompatible because they broke the rules in ways that couldn't be measured, couldn't be countered. They brought chaos to the order of the pits, and for that, they were deemed too dangerous. As the elder finished his story, he leaned back, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. That's why humans are banned. They aren't just fighters. There's something else entirely, something none of us can afford to understand too deeply. The aliens around him were silent, each lost in thought. For some, it was a relief that the ban remained intact. But for others, it sparked a new sense of curiosity, perhaps even admiration. Humans were mysterious, driven by something that transcended pain and strategy. In that silence, they all felt it, the lingering question of what might happen if another human ever set foot in the galactic fighting pits again. The Galactic Council's decision to ban humans from the pits had ignited an undercurrent of curiosity that simmered in the minds of fighters, spectators, and officials alike. Yet, for years, no human had attempted to challenge the ban. It was as though a silent agreement had been reached. Humans were too disruptive, too volatile, to fit within the established order of the galactic fighting culture. The Council's ruling was left unchallenged, until, against all odds, rumors began to circulate that a new human was rumored to be looking for entry into the pits. The speculation grew louder as word spread. Fighters, officials, and even trainers whispered of a human warrior known only as Iris, said to be training in the outer reaches of the system. She was reportedly every bit as skilled and unrelenting as Reed, the human who had so thoroughly upset the pits before. And while many dismissed the rumors as mere gossip, others couldn't ignore the tension building in the shadows of the arenas. What if Iris was real? What if she was even more skilled than Reed? Could the council even prevent her from stepping into the pits, given the rumors of her skill and reputation? Within days, the council chambers were buzzing with emergency meetings, deliberations, and strategy discussions on how to handle the situation. They couldn't risk another human in the pits, yet how could they turn her away without sparking intergalactic tensions? The council knew that allowing another human into the arena would mean facing the same unpredictable chaos as before, and perhaps even worse. Humans, it seemed, had a way of galvanizing others to defy their limitations, and the council feared that this new human, if allowed to fight, might reignite questions and disruptions that they'd worked so hard to bury. Meanwhile, the public's interest only intensified. Stories about Reed's legendary fights resurfaced, circulated among fighters who analyzed every detail of his technique, hoping to understand what had made him so deadly. And, as often happens with legends, each retelling grew more intense. The humans were rumored to possess an unparalleled resilience, a mental edge that was nearly impossible to counter. To many, it seemed that humans were uniquely wired for conflict, their unpredictable emotions fueling a relentless drive that could shatter even the strongest warriors. As the council struggled with their decision, Iris herself remained elusive. Despite the rumors, no one had actually seen her train, nor did anyone have concrete proof that she was even in the system. But her alleged presence cast a long shadow over the pits, with every fighter, from the lowest rookie to the most seasoned champion, grappling with the implications of her arrival. What would it mean for the pits if she showed up? Would the council hold to their ban, or would they dare risk the integrity of the pits for the sake of the spectacle? And then, just when the speculation seemed to be reaching its peak, a message arrived. It was addressed to the council, bearing the official seal of Iris herself, though no one could verify its origin. The message was brief, almost mocking in its simplicity. It read, "I am coming. Prepare the pits." The council's reaction was swift and intense. They held emergency meetings, discussing whether they should enforce the ban with armed force or find a diplomatic way to deter her entry. But Iris's message had already struck a chord among the people. Alien fighters and civilians alike were rallying around the prospect of witnessing what a human could bring to the arena once more. Crowds gathered outside the council chambers, holding banners and chanting, "Let her fight!" The council members, who had hoped the ban would settle matters quietly, were now in the midst of a political storm. Inside the council, opinions were divided. Some argued that the ban must be upheld at all costs. Humans, they insisted, were too volatile. Others, however, feared the backlash if they denied her entry, seeing in the unrest an opportunity for rebellion among the other races, who admired the human spirit and resilience. Some council members believed it was better to let her fight and face the consequences, hoping to quell the public outcry. But there was no easy answer, and time was running out. Meanwhile, Iris herself remained a mystery. No one knew where she was or how she planned to enter the arena, but the council couldn't ignore the rising fervor in the city. Fighters and spectators alike had turned her impending arrival into a kind of galactic pilgrimage, with crowds descending on the pits, eager to witness whatever fate awaited. The council found itself caught between maintaining their control and risking a rebellion they might not contain. And the more they tried to suppress the stories about Iris, the stronger the rumors grew. In the days leading up to the rumored arrival, a palpable tension settled over the pits. Fighters trained with an intensity not seen in years, hoping to test their skills against the human legend, while spectators speculated wildly about what Iris would bring to the arena. Would she be as calculating as Reed, dismantling her opponents with cold precision? Or would she unleash a new kind of fury, a recklessness that would shake the pits to their core? As the anticipation grew, the council finally issued a public statement. They would not actively prevent Iris from entering the pits but warned that they would hold her accountable for the chaos she caused. The statement was a thinly veiled attempt to discourage her, yet it only fueled the excitement. The council's carefully crafted control over the pits was slipping, and they were now on the verge of losing the loyalty of the very fighters and spectators who had once revered them. And then, on the eve of the rumored fight, the city seemed to hold its breath. Vendors set up stands, selling trinkets and keepsakes bearing Iris's name, while old recordings of Reed's legendary battles played on massive screens throughout the city. Alien warriors from every corner of the galaxy filled the stands, watching in hushed expectation. The council watched too, with growing apprehension, as they prepared to face the repercussions of a decision they were no longer in control of. Whether Iris showed up or not, her name had already left its mark on the pits. The council, once resolute in their ban, now found themselves unable to quell the fervor of the crowd. For the first time, they realized that humanity's power in the pits wasn't just physical. It was a force that challenged their authority, their rules, and the very nature of the arena itself. In that tension-filled silence, with fighters on edge and spectators caught between excitement and dread, the stage was set. The galactic fighting pits, built to house only the strongest, were on the verge of a reckoning. Whether they knew it or not, they were about to witness a human spirit that defied every expectation, every regulation, and every limit they'd ever known. And as the council looked out over the gathering masses, they understood, perhaps too late, that no law, no ban, could contain what was coming. The days leading up to the rumored arrival of Iris grew increasingly tense, with the anticipation transforming into a feverish atmosphere throughout the galactic fighting pits. While most fighters prepared themselves mentally and physically, pushing their limits in hopes of facing her, others began to speculate openly, wondering what strategy could possibly work against a human opponent. The fighters who had witnessed Reed's battles years before shared their insights with the rookies, emphasizing the ruthless efficiency and unpredictability that humans brought to combat. Reed's battles had left an impression, one that was not easily shaken, and the whispers in the pit were laced with both admiration and trepidation. Spectators flooded into the city, each eager for a glimpse of this rumored human, and every tavern and common hall buzzed with tales and predictions about the fight. Vendors capitalized on the excitement, selling makeshift posters and souvenirs with Iris versus the pits emblazoned across them. Despite the uncertainty, the energy was electrifying, as if every alien citizen, fighter, and council member knew that they stood on the edge of something monumental. For some, it was the chance to see a legend in action, but for others, especially the council, it was a moment fraught with concern, as they sensed the power of their authority slipping away. But amid the noise, the council itself was deeply divided, struggling with how best to handle the situation. Some council members argued that they should stand firm in their decision to keep Iris from competing, while others feared that defying public demand might spark an uprising. They were walking a fine line, balancing the need to preserve control over the pits with the desire to avoid alienating the populace. After hours of heated debate, they reluctantly settled on a compromise. Iris would be permitted to enter the pits, but the council would monitor her every move closely. Should she cause any disruption or threaten the established order, they would step in without hesitation. Meanwhile, Iris's reputation grew with each passing day, and her supposed absence only added to the mystery. She was becoming a symbol of defiance, embodying a resilience that resonated with the other alien races, many of whom saw her as a challenge to the rigid authority of the council. To them, Iris represented more than a fighter. She was a testament to a fighting spirit that refused to be subdued by rules or decrees. The council's attempts to suppress her story had only fanned the flames, sparking debates about the nature of strength, freedom, and the true purpose of the pits. What had begun as a fight between champions now felt like a battle for the soul of the arena itself. On the night before the rumored showdown, a hush fell over the city. Crowds gathered outside the council chambers, watching the darkened windows with anticipation, as if hoping for any sign that the council would relent or reveal their plans for the following day. Fighters and citizens alike held their breath, each feeling the weight of the coming hours as they considered what Iris's arrival could mean. The pits, once a symbol of structured combat, were on the verge of becoming a symbol of rebellion. And as the lights dimmed and the voices quieted, one question lingered on everyone's mind: would Iris fulfill the legend? As dawn broke, a hush settled over the pits as the first of the council members arrived, their expressions grim and their movements tense. The council's presence was a rarity, typically reserved for only the most prestigious fights. But today, the stakes were different, and everyone knew it. The council stood in silent formation near the entrance, their posture imposing as they surveyed the crowd with wary eyes. They hoped that their presence alone might deter any unruly behavior, but deep down, they understood that this fight was beyond their control. Hours passed, and still, there was no sign of Iris. Restlessness grew among the spectators, who exchanged anxious glances, wondering if this entire ordeal had been nothing more than a rumor. Some began to murmur, questioning whether she would appear at all. Just as impatience threatened to boil over, a figure emerged from the shadows, walking with a quiet confidence that silenced the crowd. Iris had arrived. She moved with an air of calm authority, her every step a testament to her focus and discipline. Clad in simple attire, she didn't carry the trappings of fame or glory. Instead, she exuded a presence that spoke of something far deeper, something primal, unyielding, and unafraid. She stopped before the council members, meeting their eyes with a gaze that held neither challenge nor submission, but something much more unnerving: indifference. The council, sensing the crowd's growing fervor, held their breath, their authority suddenly feeling fragile in the face of this single, composed human. The spectators were captivated, leaning forward as they took in every detail of Iris's face, her stance, the way she seemed to absorb the energy around her without faltering. For the fighters, she represented a question they couldn't answer, a force they didn't fully understand. Some of them whispered about the stories they'd heard, about Reed's calm fury in the ring, about the brutal and calculated strikes that had left his opponents broken and reeling. But as they looked at Iris, they sensed something different, something that went beyond even Reed's reputation. She was here to prove something, not to them, but perhaps to herself. As she stepped into the center of the arena, the council's lead speaker addressed her, his voice laced with an underlying tension that he couldn't mask. Iris, you stand before the Galactic Council and the spectators of the pits. Do you understand the implications of your participation here? Iris simply nodded, her expression unreadable. She didn't indulge the crowd with a speech or acknowledgement. She was here to fight, and that was all that mattered. The council members exchanged uneasy glances, recognizing that they had lost control of the situation. The crowd, now fully entranced, chanted her name, their voices echoing through the arena with a power that sent chills down the council's spine. They had hoped to contain her, to prevent her from disrupting their precious balance, but now, as she stood there, unyielding in her purpose, they understood that they could not contain her spirit. The council member's voice wavered slightly as he continued. Very well, the pits are open to you. But know this, any actions that disrupt the order or threaten the sanctity of this place will not be tolerated. Iris's response was a nod, barely acknowledging the warning. She turned her back on the council, her focus shifting to the open arena before her. Her gaze was fixed, unflinching, as she stepped forward, ready to face whatever challenger awaited. The crowd's anticipation reached a fever pitch, their excitement merging into a single, thunderous roar as the first challenger stepped into the ring. And in that moment, the council understood the truth. They could not silence her or the spirit she represented. Iris had come not to honor their traditions but to forge her own path, to remind them that true strength was something they could never control. As Iris and her opponent prepared to clash, the council could only watch, powerless to alter the course of what was about to unfold. With a steady, focused gaze, Iris advanced toward the heart of the arena. Her opponent, a towering figure from the Zarkan race, known for their brute strength and unyielding resilience, stood with his arms crossed, muscles coiled and ready. The crowd hushed in anticipation, their collective breath held as they witnessed the beginning of what was certain to be an unforgettable clash. Iris remained calm, her face unreadable, while the Zarkan shifted, assessing her with a mixture of disdain and curiosity. The Zarkan let out a mocking laugh, clearly unimpressed by Iris's smaller stature and seemingly unassuming presence. He sneered, making a grand show of stretching his muscles, cracking his knuckles, and drawing attention to his intimidating form. To him, this was just another fight, a formality before a swift victory. He hadn't fought a human before, and the stories seemed exaggerated, almost laughable. But as Iris took her stance, a shift in the air was undeniable. The audience, sensing the intensity of her presence, fell silent, captivated by her quiet but imposing demeanor. Their eyes met, and Iris offered no words, no taunts, just a measured readiness that made the Zarkan pause, if only for a split second. Her stance, low and balanced, exuded a controlled energy, one that spoke of precision rather than brute force. The Zarkan hesitated, but only briefly, then he charged, a thunderous roar echoing through the arena as he lunged forward, arms wide and ready to crush. The ground shook with each pounding step, his massive frame advancing like a force of nature. But Iris remained unfazed. As he closed the distance, Iris sprang into motion with a speed that defied the Zarkan's expectations. She sidestepped his lunge with fluidity, slipping out of his reach and striking swiftly with a low, calculated kick to the side of his knee. The blow was precise, targeting a weak point that caused the Zarkan to stagger. He stumbled but regained his balance, his expression shifting from smugness to irritation as he realized he had underestimated her. Angered by the hit, the Zarkan swung again, his massive fists aiming to pummel Iris into submission. But she was already in motion, her movements flowing like water as she ducked, dodged, and wove around his strikes. Each of his heavy blows missed by mere inches, and with every missed hit, his frustration grew, evident in the way his swings became more reckless and less controlled. Iris, meanwhile, was the epitome of focus. Every step, every dodge, every strike was deliberate, her control unbreakable even in the face of his fury. She retaliated with a series of rapid strikes, aiming at his joints, his ribs, his weak spots, the places no one ever dared to target on a creature as formidable as a Zarkan. Her hits were not aimed at causing immediate damage, but rather to weaken and wear him down gradually. She was playing the long game, her patience and precision contrasting sharply with his brute, forceful attacks. The crowd watched in awe as the dynamic unfolded, realizing that this was not a brawl of brute strength but a battle of skill and strategy. The Zarkan roared in frustration, his anger blinding him to the fact that Iris was systematically dismantling him, weakening his foundation one hit at a time. He swung wildly, determined to land even a single blow, but Iris remained elusive, her agility and awareness unmatched. She was in control, guiding the flow of the fight, her every move calculated to keep him on the defensive. The longer the battle wore on, the clearer it became to the audience that this was more than just a fight. It was a demonstration of the very thing that set humans apart, their ability to adapt, to strategize, and to outthink their opponents, regardless of size or strength. Finally, as the Zarkan's movements began to slow, his breaths coming in labored gasps, Iris saw her opening. She circled him with a predatory calm, calculating the final strike that would end the match. The crowd sensed the shift, their collective tension building as they leaned forward, eyes locked on the scene before them. And then, in a flash, Iris struck, a precise, devastating blow to the Zarkan's side that sent him crumbling to his knees, gasping for breath. The arena fell silent, the weight of her victory settling over everyone present. The Zarkan, panting heavily, looked up at Iris, a mixture of disbelief and reluctant respect in his eyes. She hadn't relied on brute strength, hadn't needed to overpower him. Instead, she had outmaneuvered him, outthought him, and ultimately left him with no choice but to accept defeat. Iris stood over him, her breathing controlled and steady, her face calm. She had won not through power alone but through intelligence, discipline, and an unbreakable resolve. As the realization of her victory settled in, a ripple of awe swept through the crowd. The spectators erupted into thunderous applause, their cheers reverberating through the arena, a tribute not just to her victory but to the unyielding human spirit she embodied. For a brief moment, Iris acknowledged the crowd with a slight nod, a quiet acknowledgement of their support, and the respect they offered her. The council members watched from their place of authority, their expressions unreadable but tense. This fight had proven something they had been hesitant to acknowledge, something they could no longer ignore. Iris's victory had been more than a display of skill, it had been a statement. Humans were not just another species to be controlled or dismissed. They were unpredictable, formidable, and capable of feats that defied conventional understanding. One of the council members leaned toward another, his voice low but laced with a newfound caution. "Perhaps we underestimated them," he murmured, eyes fixed on Iris, who stood in the center of the arena, her stance unshaken. The other council member nodded slowly, recognizing the shift in power, however subtle, that had just occurred. As Iris turned to leave the arena, a path opened for her through the crowd. Spectators, fighters, and even former critics looked on with respect, some even stepping back in awe. For the first time, Iris felt the weight of what she had achieved, not just for herself but for her people and their reputation. She had fought not to prove humans were the strongest, but to show they were not to be dismissed, not to be underestimated. As she exited the arena, a voice from the crowd broke through the cheers, a single shout that captured the sentiment shared by so many. "Long live the warrior of Earth!"